planning permission in the UK, for anyone that's not fully aware, you submit your plans, it goes to the local authority, and the officers will have a look at it, and then it can go to committee either through recommendation from one of the officers, or it can get pulled in by councillors into committee who have major objections, and then it goes to a democratic vote. As to whether or not you get your planning. If it gets rejected, then it goes, well, you can either just accept the rejection or you can appeal the rejection. And then you submit a planning appeal statement that's, trying to fight back against the council's rejection. And that goes to the Independent Inspectorate, which is another body in the UK that then comes impartially. They're not a part of that local authority. They're not a part of the planning submission person, whether that's a developer or one of us sort of guys. They come in and partially look at it on material grounds and determine and look at the appeal statement from sort of both sides of the planners and the developer, and then decide whether or not it gets planning. What they're doing now is removing the appeal statement. So instead, you can submit your full plans, and once it goes to committee and it gets appealed, it's only all the contents that were in the original planning application and the consultation process that the independent inspectorate can assess on the appeal grounds. So I can't really tell whether this is going to be beneficial to developers in the long run. It would definitely be a little bit more annoying in the short term because you have to put a lot more work into the planning application, to weight it in anticipation that it might go to appeal, or if this is removing our ability to be able to adequately appeal something after it's gone through a committee hearing. What do you guys think? And for the viewers' benefit, I've got a bit of literature on screen here if you just want to read kind of the headlines on it, but you can go and look at this stuff online if you want. What do you think, Jack? Do you think this is actually good, bad, ugly, indifferent? What do you think?
I think they're just trying to make things cleaner from the outset. I think it's going to make a little bit more forward planning work for most people's planning consultants, but I don't think it'll be a huge shift. I think that it's a tweak to the process and the system, which is already shit anyway. I don't think it's going to be like a huge landslide of change, if I'm honest.
Do you think it benefits the council or the developer more?
I think it means that the council have less to go through to accept or reject. I think it kind of sets out the stall from the get-go so that it's a lot clearer. Whereas quite a lot of applications, you sort of fiddle around with a few bits that might be to the advantage of the developer. So I think it only benefits the council.
What do you think, Stu?
Yeah, I agree with Jack. I think it makes it a quicker process. It gives everyone the same evidence, if you like, as you put a plan application in. You can't keep adding stuff to it, or if there's a refusal and you have to go to appeal. I've never been to appeal, so I don't actually know the process, but one would assume they're just going to take the whole pack of what they've been. They can only base planning based on the evidence of the paper they got in front of them.
I can explain how the appeal process in a full planning application typically works. So when you submit a planning application, there's certain parameters that are supposed to be appeased before you get consent. When you submit a planning application, you go for a district level of the application. So for me, that might be South Oxfordshire. That district then control the planning application and basically have the overarching rights to approve it or not approve it. One of the consultees, which is your neighbours and the parish, have their say on the planning application to the district to enable them to make a decision that's more localized than the district. So South Oxfordshire, I can drive for an hour that way and I'm still in South Oxfordshire. But the purpose of the consultees, the consultation with the neighbours and the parish, is to get a local opinion, a local feel, and to give people that are actually local to go, well, hang on a second, you don't even live here. How do you know that that's not going to block my light or look like a pile of shit or whatever it may be? So they can contribute their views to the district, and then the district have a choice to make a decision. If the applicant disagrees fundamentally on the of planning law against the district's decision, which again in turn might actually be reflected by neighbours or parish, you then appeal it. And the way you appeal it is it then goes to a national level. I think the national office is actually based in Bristol, where Bristol then take a view at the application and your arguments of appeal so that you can argue the grounds of planning law, so that you hopefully haven't got the NIMBYism that is being encroached on. Now that's in theory how it works, but it's actually very difficult. I think that I had a planning application in Reading which got rejected for overdevelopment, and then I disagreed with that because I actually wasn't increasing the size of the footprint, and I was like, this is nonsense. So I then took it to appeal. The national policy consider national space standards as a must, which is fair enough, but Reading do not adopt national space standards in Reading Town Centre. So I had done an application that doesn't comply with national space standards because I knew that Reading don't care. So I got rejected at district level and I got rejected at appeal level. So it's a little bit more convoluted than the process. So they're essentially allowing less movement and scope creep between application and appeal, which makes it more difficult for developers. You've got to be more thorough and forward planning. So you've got to now do an application that if you take it to appeal, it complies with a lot more broadly and goes up to a lot more scrutiny. It also takes about 9 months to get an appeal approved. So none of it's quick.
And how much the planning inspectorates and the planning appeal lawyers and stuff? I mean, they're expensive. We've put customers into.
As a developer, you're typically just readjusting your same application with probably some sort of covering letter or slightly tweaked design and access statement. I think what the council's trying to prevent is you doing a planning application, then them saying we're rejecting this on the grounds of that roof is too protruding, and then you adjust how it's protruding, or you can obviously provide more evidence. You might then do a daylight sunlight survey and then submit it for appeal or whatever. But yeah, I'm sure Dorian actually has quite a good overview of the
appeal process.
I'm not a massive fan of the front. What they're trying to do is they're trying to front load more information. So when an application goes together, there's so much evidence in hand, and they're making that more onerous. And I hate that. I think that you should, in theory, have a phased process. You submit designs, and they go, "That's approved." Now you've got to do ecology, bats, daylight, sunlight, access, health and safety, like all of that shit. Like sometimes 100 times the amount of the actual just planning application for the council to go, yeah, you could probably get that approved. So for all this front loading is ridiculous. To get approval for one house in Reading will cost you about £40,000 in surveys, assessments, application fees, planning consultancy fees, noise, air quality, sound, daylight, sunlight, access, contamination, ecology, bats, fucking newts. What else we got? Badgers. So you throw all of that in the ring, and then they go, you can't actually get planning there because we don't like the design. You're like, brilliant. I've got to redo all of those assessments to fucking change it from brickwork to flint work. Great, cool. I'll do that then, shall I? Another 20 grand in. I've had a really funny one on my own house. So the original application was I did a pre-app with a traditional build, so flint and brickwork cottage. Pre-apps came back and they said because it's AONB, area of outstanding natural beauty, we would prefer a contemporary design. So I then drew a contemporary building, being me, super relaxed, bend over backwards. Don't worry, guys, got you covered. Drew a contemporary building, including another few surveys, and then submit the full app, and it got consented. I then went back in for a more enhanced scheme to maximize the space, get more volume, change a few things around. Annoyingly, I then triggered BNG, so biodiversity net gain, which means I've got to do a contribution there. And the parish, who were part of the pre-app feedback, said that they don't like the contemporary design. They'd rather a traditional building. I'm there thinking, now what's going on here? Make your mind up.
Yeah, we've had that. we have that all the time. And then we have people inside planning disagreeing with each other. The planning officer and the placemaking officer disagreeing with each other. The highways officer and the surface water officer disagreeing with each other. And sometimes in applications, we're like, basically on the back seat, whilst the internal departments try to agree. We've just had one now where the planning officer and the highways officer were disagreeing on the number of parking spaces needed, and we were just like, any update on the application? And we were like, oh well, we don't agree with the highways, and this has been escalated to the manager, and we're like, that's mad. And the reason why we are where we are, and I was at the Welsh Parliament recently, the Senedd, and I said the same thing. The housing is a priority, but it's not the priority. Everything is a priority in today's world, and everyone's got to be right. Everyone's got to agree, and it takes a long time to escalate to the point where you can move forward if somebody's not in agreement. Whereas as a business owner, we're so used to saying, right, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? What's your opinion? Okay, I've heard you all. This is what we're doing. This is why. 2 out of 3 of those you might not be going with, but boom, you've moved forward. The system is not set up like that. Everyone's got an equal voice and priority, and that's where you get stalemate, and that's why you need all the reports, and they all got to be approved before the planning can be approved. It's backwards, in my opinion.
So, what do you think of them abolishing appeal statements, D?
Until you go through the process, I don't know, because they say lots of stuff. They do it in Wales too, but they always find another way to stall it, with another technicality. So I don't really have faith, to be honest. You just have to see.
My main concern with it is it feels like they've moved a bit of work at the back end to the front end and not materially changed anything. They haven't delegislated. They haven't made it practically easier. They've just moved the work.
As Jack says, every time we have to do a planning application, and we always do full ones, you do so much work because as it already says in there, that when you have to go to appeal, you can't rely on any information that's not part of the application process. So you have to go, every time you do a planning application, you have to think about the appeal in mind. So you have to go to the nth degree on every report. You have to cross every T and dot every I, and it becomes so expensive. Like, we've got one now that we're taking to appeal, and they was telling us they were going to refuse it because of ecology, and we've had to spend a fortune to get ready for appeal, and you don't know, it's a 50-50 chance. You just have no idea what's going to happen. But
I think the problem for the developer is you do let's say you've got a significantly large planning application, you do all the work, you've got all the assessments and surveys together, you submit something, and you or your planning consultant have missed something fairly fundamental that wasn't that obvious. It's quite unique to the site. The council pull up on it and go, nope, see you later, rejected. And then you do an assessment and survey or counterbalance that. What I don't like about it is I like it when a planning officer comes back and go, have you acknowledged this issue? Have you got any evidence to prove that you can make my life easier to approve this? If not, I'm going to have to reject. And you go, yeah, sure, I'll do this survey, we'll do the assessment, and then we'll resubmit it. Can you delay the time frame? In an ideal world, if things should be approved, you want to work with the council to get them approved. I think the best advice that you can really have when it comes to planning is just make sure that your planning consultant is better than the planning officer reviewing the application. And that's it's essentially a game of who knows more.